Crank down here at Waco Animal Hospital. Today we are going to be talking about dog microchipping and what all you'd like to know.
All right, Dr. Crank, what does it mean to have my dog microchipped?
So microchipping is basically a permanent form of identification. So it is something that you have your collar, you have your tags, but these guys can slip them, they can come off somehow or another, or get worn, or even not have your updated information on them. And so with a microchip, it's something that we actually will implant right between the shoulder blades and under the skin, and it's a little metal chip that stays in them for their entire life.
All right, so can microchips be used to track my dog?
So not quite. There are necessarily GPS trackers that can go on their collars, and some of them can actually hook up to your smartphones, and those are pretty handy. But the microchips themselves don't have any GPS capabilities.
That's okay. So how is a microchip used to identify my dog?
So each microchip has a unique number. So whenever we insert microchips, which this is the microchips we use with Home Again, and so these are something that they each have an individual number, and it's several digits, and so that number is unique to your dog. These chips in particular are universal, so it is something that these are pretty much around the world that these numbers will correspond to your dog. And once we actually register these chips for you, they are something that we can insert your address, your phone number, your email, even an additional contact information for another person, so that whenever someone finds your dog, you can actually have that scanned, and that number will trace right back to you. And that contact information is also something that you can update if you were to move or get a new phone number as well.
Great. So who can scan my dog's microchip information?
So not just anybody. So you will have to keep in mind that your dog will need to be taken to either a shelter or a vet's office, or someone that does have a scanner. So we have our scanner here. This is also a universal scanner. So this is what we actually use to scan the dog. And my assistant here today is Remy. And so he actually does have a chip in him. So let me see if I can get our machine to cooperate here. But they will actually be able to have it scanned, and it pops up his number right there. So that's something that will trace right back to be able to allow us to know what his name is and who his owners are.
Great. So what does the microchip recovery process look like in the event my dog is lost?
So as far as that goes, you do want to notify your local veterinarians and shelters and let them know that, hey, your dog is missing and that it's microchipped. And so another thing you always want to make sure of is that your information is up to date for your microchip. If it's not, then it's really hard to get in contact with you. Another thing is if your microchip is not registered, like if you were to have gotten your dog from a shelter, sometimes those aren't registered, or sometimes they don't have the new information. So you do want to make for sure that that is registered so that you can be contacted and it's not just the shelter's information. Once your dog is scanned, we will enter that number into the system, and there is a universal lookup for those microchip numbers. And so we actually will enter that in, and it will pop up a name and number, or we can even contact the microchip company and they'll get us that name and number, and we'll work to get in contact with you.
Great. So why do veterinarians recommend that you get your dog microchipped?
Kind of goes back to being a permanent form of identification. It's so easy for these guys to slip their collars, or unfortunately, if some people have some heinous kind of methods, they will take the collar off. And so it is something that not only is it a permanent form of ID, but it's also a legal form of ID. So if your dog is chipped, then there's no denying that that is your dog, and that it's contacted or overall with your information right on that.
Yeah. So what if I lose or forget my dog's microchip information?
So it's pretty easy to access again. So one, depending upon the company, like us, we use Home Again, so we can actually call Home Again, let them know the owner's name, and you can tell them your dog's name and information, and they can get that number for you. Or you can even go on there, and they do have these handy dandy little tags, which Remy has chewed up his, but they have little Home Again tags that they can get you as well that have his number. Or you can even bring them into your local shelter or veterinarian, and we can definitely scan it for you and write that number down.
All right, my last question is, are there any other smart products that you know of that can connect to my dog's microchip?
So there are several. Some of them are associated with Apple, others are just kind of generic, but they actually can go right onto their collar. But other than that, as far as an actual microchip that's GPS related, that's not really a thing at this point.
All right, thank you.